Hello and welcome back in, everyone, to another episode of the College Sports Hive. That's Leaf. I'm Scott, and we're here with you on this Tuesday afternoon to bring you some college basketball action. It's been a minute since we talked about what's happening. We've seen the Sweet 16 and two of the Elite Eight games happen thus far. Since we previewed all of those Sweet 16 matchups, so we got a lot to get to bracket wise. We'll talk about some of the games that happened in the Sweet 16 and then the two games that happened last night in the Elite Eight. And then we'll give you a little bit of a preview of the two games happening tonight and a hint at one of the matchups that's already set for the Final Four. So got a lot of good stuff to get to there. But first and foremost, let's talk about some hires that have happened recently in the landscape of college basketball. A few new faces at some different programs. Leaf, do you want to take us through some of those?
Yeah, for sure. We can start with the program that's on your wall and on your cap there. The Utes have hired Craig Smith from Utah State. He was at Utah State for 3 years, and he would, other than the year with coronavirus where they won their conference tournament and were going to head to the tournament, they made the tournament the other two, and we're going to be 3 for 3. I think that's a really great hire because everywhere he's gone, he's transformed the program, and I think he can restore some of the historical basketball program atmosphere to Utah that's been lacking of late. Indiana, another team that's got a very rich basketball history, hired Mike Woodson, a former player under Bobby Knight. And I'm curious to see how this goes. A lot of people have likened it to Juwan Howard, the hiring for Michigan, going to an alma mater, an African-American coach who has NBA coaching experience. And obviously Juwan Howard and Michigan are doing very well. Let's see if Mike Woodson in Indiana can follow that same recipe. And one more that I thought was really interesting was Shaka Smart, who had his best year at Texas, yet left for Marquette. And I'm not sure whether that was Texas saying, okay, well, we didn't get out of the first round, so goodbye, but didn't really disclose it, or Shaka thought that there was just a greener grass elsewhere. But nonetheless, Shaka is at Marquette, and there are some notable spots open. The Texas job now that Shaka's vacated, and I'm very curious to see what happens there. But these are some big transactions in the world of basketball coaching hires and the such. So I'm curious to see what continues to happen because I don't think the offseason is done yet.
Yeah, Shaka Smart's a very big name when you bring up college basketball coaches. He really revolutionized his patented style at VCU and then took that to Texas, a very big marquee job, and is now heading to Marquette. So that's big news. And yeah, just to touch on the Utah hire with Greg Smith, I think there's a lot of names being thrown around. Some of the Jazz assistant coaches were in the mix too. So I think it's good that they stuck in the college game. And as you mentioned, Craig Smith had such great success at Utah State up in Logan. So he'll be bringing hopefully some of that down to the University of Utah to provide some stability in that program that really hasn't – it's been stable, but it has been underproductive. Let's just call it that. For the last few years, they've had talented rosters and just unable to have the success inside the conference that they've wanted to have the last few years. So nothing against Larry Kay. I thought he was a great coach, and I don't necessarily think all of the hate that he got late in the season was warranted, but we've already seen two pretty big names into the transfer portal from Utah's roster, Alfonso Plummer and Timmy Allen. So I covered some of this in the last episode of Steven's Sports Sunday, even though that was kind of taken on a different tangent. But yeah, big hiring news throughout the world of college basketball. So if you have any questions on some of that, just make sure to feel free to let us know, and we'll be happy to talk some more about that. So let's get to the bracket. I guess I can do the little Sherry-Do thing here with you, and we'll all take a look at it together. This is, again, my just terrible bracket that Leaf and I both filled out. We see
– Your national champion's alive, though.
It's true. Here is a game that is happening tonight with Gonzaga and USC, which we'll get to here in a minute. And then the other Elite Eight game happening tonight is Michigan and UCLA. The games that happened last night, Houston and Oregon State. Houston was able to get the win there, 67-61 over an Oregon State team that just had a pretty historic run throughout the NCAA tournament, winning 3 games and really looking dominant in doing so, beating 3 very good teams in Tennessee, Oklahoma State, and Loyola Chicago to get to the Elite Eight. Just very impressive stuff from the Beavers, and just kind of, I guess that'll be my first question is, what did you make of Oregon State's kind of run deep into this tournament?
That was crazy. that was probably my favorite storyline of March so far. There's been some really fun ones, but that was a team that was not going to make the tournament unless they won the conference tournament. They won the conference tournament, and then they made the Elite Eight. That's a run like that I would liken to that of Survive and Advance with NC State. The only way they were making the tournament was winning the conference tournament. They beat Virginia with Ralph Sampson. They were able to get by North Carolina. Some powerhouse teams, and I wouldn't say that they beat the same caliber teams, but they won 6-7 straight games with absolute importance, and you don't see that too often. A lot of teams can coast into March because of their resume. That wasn't the case, and you saw a team play inspired basketball. They believed, and they beat some teams that people thought were strong favorites. I said myself that Loyola Chicago would make the Final Four once they beat Illinois, and I don't think I was alone in that sentiment. They're a really, really good team. You see Oklahoma State has Cade Cunningham. That was another popular pick, and Oregon State handled them. So that was an awesome run. I'm really happy for Wayne Tinkle and the guys there. Sad it fell short, but Houston played a great game. And I think that the Oregon State represented themselves and represented the Pac-12 in a big way that showed the depth of the conference that had been hated on for a lot of this year. And we talked about that at a little bit of length previously, but I just want to reiterate that Oregon State really, really showed out this tournament and showed that good basketball can be played anywhere.
Yeah, absolutely. And you're looking at 4 of the matchups that happened in the Sweet 16, one of them being here with Michigan and Florida State, the other one being UCLA and Alabama. Syracuse and Houston, we had 2-11 versus 2 matchups here. We both picked incorrectly on that one. We picked Syracuse over Houston and Alabama over UCLA, and of course the opposite happened. Loyola Chicago did drop this Sweet 16 game to Oregon State. And then up at the top half of the bracket, you had Gonzaga beating Creighton, Baylor beating Villanova, Arkansas barely beating Oral Roberts after Oral Roberts had a chance to really win that game with a late
That was a good look. That was a really good look.
Yeah, it was an amazing game. And then USC really quite frankly dominating Oregon, which I was a little bit surprised at. It seemed to me like Oregon came out a little bit flat in that game. They really started to hit their stride in the second half when they cut a 21-point lead down to just 9 at one point in time. And you thought there was still like 5-ish minutes left in the game. You thought, oh my word, this would be a crazy comeback for Oregon. But then they just ran out of steam, and USC really poured it on late and was able to advance pretty handily over a conference foe in Oregon. So that was another interesting game. So we've had 2 games in the Elite Eight happen, as I've mentioned. Baylor beat Arkansas by 9, but Arkansas really made that gritty, made that hard for a long time. They competed against, in my opinion, one of the best teams in the bracket. And some of your thoughts on Arkansas's run throughout this tournament and that game between Baylor.
Yeah, Arkansas really impressed me throughout the tournament. They played well together. They played fast. They played aggressive basketball and closed out a lot of close games. But one thing that stood out to me is they had deficits in each game. And I think that deficits are hard to come back from anyway, but against a team of the caliber of Baylor, you can't dig yourself a hole. And that's what happened. Baylor got off to a 15-2 start maybe. And I just think that from then on, it was going to be too hard for Arkansas to have a fighter's chance at that game, because I thought Baylor was better anyway. And the one thing that really hurt Arkansas is Moses Moody, their lead scorer, just couldn't get a rhythm. And I don't want to put blame on him at all. I just think that to beat a team like Baylor, you have to have everyone playing very well, and you can't afford a lead. And that's what happened. Baylor got off to an early lead, and Arkansas tried to come back. They got it down to 4 a little bit, but I think it was firmly in Baylor's grasp the whole way. But kudos to Eric Musselman in Arkansas. I think this is a program that's not going to be on the rise, and not only for this year, but I think this will be a program in the SEC to watch for the next few years.
Yeah, absolutely. And I would be remiss if I didn't ask you to give some of your thoughts on Oral Roberts as after they lost their Sweet 16 matchup to Arkansas, just the second ever team to reach the Sweet 16 as a 15 seed. Give me some of your thoughts about this team and their kind of historic run deep into this tournament.
Yeah, Oral Roberts was awesome, and they had a legitimate chance. We talked about it being a really good look. They had the nation's leading scorer with a 3-point shot to win the game, and it was just short. But in a larger picture, Oral Roberts has two players in Max Asmus and Kevin O'Banner that I think are potential pro players, and you don't often see that out of a 15 seed. And that's what made them so difficult to play, is because they could match up. They shot really well. They shot I think it was 0.12% lower than the all-time free throw percentage record. They made free throws in all of their games. To beat Ohio State, they had to hit 2 free throws to send that to overtime. Against Florida, they closed it out with free throws. They played scrappy defense. They were overwhelmed athletically in all 3 of their matchups, yet I mean, they're net positive. That you don't see that very often. So I was really rooting for them to make the Elite Eight. I thought that would have been awesome. But kudos to Arkansas, but certainly kudos to Oral Roberts, and I hope that they get more chances to make runs like that. And I think it'll be more often in years to come that 15 seeds, 16 seeds. I think the level of playing field is becoming more even. But I also have one little bold claim. I think the head coach for Oral Roberts will not be there too much longer. I think he's going to be a popular coaching hire while we talked about coaching hires earlier.
Love it. I love it for sure. Yeah. Arkansas was actually down in that game early to Oral Roberts. Oral Roberts was playing a lot of that game with the lead. Kind of goes hand in hand with what you mentioned against the game between Arkansas and Baylor. Arkansas just got in too big of a hole against Baylor early on, and Baylor was able to withstand the late barrage that most teams have not been able to withstand. Arkansas was down to Texas Tech, and they weren't ever. I don't think they ever trailed to Colgate, but they might have at one point in time.
No, they were down early in the first half against Colgate, but they led most of the way.
It was kind of the trend with Arkansas in this tournament was getting to a deficit early and then being able to play out of it in the second half and win games going away that way. They weren't able to do so against Baylor in this one. So Baylor will advance to the Final Four in this matchup over here on the right. And then, excuse me, I got some hiccups or something going on. My bad. We got Houston over here who won this game against Oregon State to advance to the Final Four. Houston has now beat Cleveland State, Rutgers, and Syracuse. And I think Rutgers and Syracuse are 2 much more impressive wins than just a 10 and 11 seed would indicate. And Oregon State is a 12 seed, even for that matter.
Yeah, I agree. Those wins are more impressive than the seed line would indicate, but there is something to be said that they haven't played a seed within the top 10. And I asked you this off camera, and I'll say it on again, why did I get off the Houston bandwagon? And the first poll we did, if you guys want to check this, I had Houston number 4. And for some reason, they continued to impress me, but they were doing so on the periphery. And I was a little dubious of their path. I thought that there were potential upset threats such as Syracuse, such as Rutgers, West Virginia. I thought was a really good team throughout the year. But Houston's looked really good. Their defense has been phenomenal, and boy, do they rebound. But my big takeaway, and that I think will be interesting, I know we're not going to preview this fully, but they've played some teams in Oregon State and Syracuse that play zone. And they crash the boards unbelievably. You know what the weakness of a zone is? That's rebounding. So I think that the offensive rebounding of Houston will be really interesting to see how they rebound against Baylor. Plays man, who's not a great rebounding team, Baylor, but that'll be interesting to see if they can continue getting. They got 19 offensive rebounds against Oregon State in a 6-point win. That just gets you more possessions, and you know what wins in basketball? More possessions, more chances to score. So I'm super excited for that Final Four matchup, and I love this Kelvin Sampson coach team. They showed some grit. Dejan Jarreau is one of my favorite players in this tournament. I think he's been awesome. He's been a leader. He's guarded the best players, and I think there's going to be some awesome matchups for that one. So I can't wait.
Well, yeah, it's going to be a great Final Four matchup for sure. All right, let's keep things in the bottom half of the bracket here and talk UCLA versus Alabama. That happened in the Sweet 16. UCLA. This game was let's just say Alabama hit a 3-pointer that they probably shouldn't have been able to get off at the end of regulation and were able to make and force overtime with this UCLA team. And then UCLA just really put the pedal down in overtime with their best player, Johnny Juzang, having fouled out of the game a long time before overtime happened. They were able to they should have won it in regulation, but they were able to hold on and force overtime and then able to really put the pedal down with some real depth pieces, putting in significant numbers in that overtime period. Give me your thoughts on this win, UCLA over Alabama, and just kind of another very intriguing storyline for the Pac-12 as they now had 3 teams going to Elite Eight.
That was, in my opinion, the best game of the tournament, just because it was the stakes were so high in the Sweet 16. And you had, like you said, that UCLA planned to foul. I think that was a coaching move on the part of Nate Oates. I think he knew that they'd foul, so he ran a trailer that got closest so that the foul would be coming, and he threw it, and they shot a deep three and swooshed it. Alex Reese, that was the shot of the tournament. I literally jumped off my couch and was like, oh my God. And I couldn't believe it. I thought for sure they were going to get a foul off, and they tie it up, go to overtime. All the momentum's in the favor of Alabama, yet UCLA wins by 10. What a story. Great resilience from the Bruins. And I think what you're seeing is a team that's battled through adversity throughout the year. They lost one of their best players, if not their best player, in Chris Smith from the start of the year in the Pac-12 play. They've had a lot of ups and downs. They started the year really well. They were the lone undefeated in Pac-12 play for a little while, and then they kind of had a topsy-turvy end of the season. They didn't play that well. But what they've got is that they advanced from the first 4 game against Michigan State, and then what surfaced from that is belief. And they believed they could beat anyone, and they came out and made free throws. They hit their free throws to end the game, and that's what really mattered in this game, because we saw Herb Jones for Alabama missed a few free throws that he would certainly like to have back. That could have sealed the deal for Alabama. And that's the beauty of March basketball, or just basketball in general. Is points can have swings can happen anytime, and all those points matter. And I love games where it's anyone's to win, not that one team has a lead and something miraculous happens. But this one, anyone could have won, and we saw UCLA come through. And I'm curious to see how they'll play Michigan. I think that'll be a really tough matchup for them. But that said, I thought Alabama would beat UCLA. I thought that was the end of the run, but I was wrong, and I kind of hope I'm wrong again. I love madness for the purpose of the upsets, and we've gotten plenty this year, so I hope to see some more.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that transitions us beautifully to the Michigan point. And I think Michigan has been an impressive statement in this tournament. And they've exceeded my expectations with playing without Isaiah Livers. And so I guess the question is after their impressive 76-58 win over Florida State in the Sweet 16, how do you think they approach this UCLA team in the Elite Eight matchup that's going to take place tonight? Because this is a team that's still playing very good basketball. They have a lot of talent on their roster. They might not have one of their best wingers, but this is a team that's still insanely dangerous, and they've showed that with wins over LSU and now Florida State, who I was dubious of as well in terms of potentially springing the 4-1 upset to get just some more chaos. Only two number 1 seeds in the Elite Eight, but this is a big test for Michigan. UCLA is playing great basketball, and I think like I'm picking Michigan. Like I'm going to pick Michigan because I just think that they've showed me a lot, and the ability that they've showed to play without Isaiah Livers against some of these teams has been very impressive to me.
Yeah, and I agree with you. I think that the display against Florida State was extremely impressive because you saw Michigan handle the athleticism of Florida State and out execute it. They had a lot of back cuts, free cutters. Hunter Dickinson in post as well in the post, and Franz Wagner really improved his NBA draft stock, which is a different story. But what I saw is his ability to handle athleticism, NBA athleticism, and with ease. He had 5 assists, 0 turnovers, along with 12.6 rebounds. But what I think in this game is the difference is I think Hunter Dickinson is a lot bigger than the UCLA bigs. I think Cody Riley and Jalen Hill are going to have a really tough time dealing with him. And I think that Franz Wagner and Jaime Jaquez is going to be really interesting. I think Michigan's going to control the pace. I think UCLA will want to run in this one. I think Michigan's played a lot of teams this year that have had a lot of stakes in the Big Ten. And this is where it comes in handy, is that they've played a lot of teams that are very different but very talented, that are of similar or better calibers to UCLA. And I know it's a one game winner take all everything. But I just think that the experience of playing different styles will behoove Michigan in this one, and they'll slow it down and execute well. And I just think they're the better team to begin with. And eventually Cinderella's the clock hits midnight, but I'm not ruling out the win for UCLA. I just think that stylistically this matchup favors Michigan.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think it'll be really interesting to watch because UCLA is playing with just all the momentum in the world. And Jaquez is a dog, man. He's a scorer. I really liked what he did in overtime against Alabama. Sorry, didn't mean to bump my computer there, but yeah, I'm really excited for that matchup. I think it's a it poses a lot of really interesting things. And if UCLA is able to spring this 11-1 upset to send another team into into the Final Four, I mean, talk about just an incredible storyline. Like, they've had three losses in the tournament now, and one of those games was a Pac-12 versus Pac-12 matchup. So, which shouldn't have happened, like, realistically that early. It never has. That's the earliest a matchup has been of Pac-12 schools. So, against USC and Oregon here in the Sweet 16. So, with that being said, let's move back to the top half of the bracket. We do have another game tonight that will be USC versus Gonzaga. And I know we're very high on Gonzaga. I love Gonzaga as a team, but this USC team is good, and they have a lot of size. And not only that size is a problem, in my opinion, for this Gonzaga team with Evan and Isaiah Mobley, but they're athletic. They can handle the ball, and they showed that against Oregon as well, because Oregon, as I mentioned, is that team that if they kind of smell that blood in the water athletically wise, they play with a different edge and a different level. And they were able to completely mitigate that when Oregon tried to press late in the game. They would have their bigs, Isaiah and Evan, handle the basketball. And if you can have that happen, I don't know, like that's a difference maker when you're trying to beat a press, is to have a big guy that knows what to do with the ball in the college game is insanely impressive. And so I'm not saying USC is going to win, but I think this matchup right here, USC and Gonzaga, might be one of the best ones that we see in the Elite Eight.
Yeah, to me, this will be a test. And I want to point out, I agree. I thought that when you can have a press break of, let's just throw it up high to Evan Mobley, and that was legitimately what it was. You guys think I'm being facetious, but Oregon had a smothering press that they've been using for like this entire season. They've produced so many steals, and they started getting momentum. And what USC did as a press release was just throw it up high, and that was the difference. They couldn't touch the ball where Evan Mobley could touch it. But I think this will be a test, and it's for the exact same reason you mentioned. The length and athleticism, and also whether USC chooses to play zone like they did against Oregon or play man, I think they'll alternate. Something that hasn't happened for Gonzaga this year is having someone that can really guard Drew Timme. Drew Timme wasn't the best player necessarily on this team, but he, in Power 5 conference matchups, he's averaging like 25 a game. I don't think that he's going to be as advantaged against Evan and Isaiah Mobley. And while Evan is a phenomenal, like, he slides his feet, he's able to impact you at the rim. He's good on offense as well. But what I think is the most important thing is there's two Mobley brothers that are similarly athletic. And so while one can guard, one, if they choose to play man, one can guard Drew Timme in the posts if they so choose to go there. There's also a weak side shot blocker, taking away penetration. And if they play zone, which is what I think they'll probably do, just because I don't think you want to play man with two bigs, kind of one chasing around Corey Kispert. If they play zone, that's going to take away. They're going to have to hit a lot of random, like, difficult mid-range shots that I don't think Gonzaga's had to hit this year. Gonzaga's the best passing team in all of basketball, in my opinion. But it's different when there's a 7'7" wingspan in your face and you have to make a decision at the rim. It's harder to finish than it is against WCC play, where you don't really see the caliber of athletes of a Pac-12 team, for instance, but especially with two brothers that are just anomalies. So I really think this will be a true test. The issue for me in USC, the reason I don't think USC can win this game, I mean, they can, it's March Madness, but the reason I don't think they will is just I don't think their offense is going to be efficient enough to compete with Gonzaga's offense. And also Gonzaga's playing pretty good defense. I know it gets all swept under the rug, but when you hold Creighton to 65 points, that's a pretty good success, considering Creighton scored a lot of those in garbage time. Gonzaga's a top 10 defense, actually. And I think that'll be more problematic for USC than their defense will against Gonzaga's offense, which is pretty crazy to say considering how good Gonzaga's offense is.
Yeah, I agree. And I also think that Gonzaga has a big edge when it comes to not only guard play, but wing play in that matter of things with Jalen Suggs. Corey Kispert and company are very athletic and insanely impressive players. I agree with you. I think Gonzaga will have enough to get it done, but I do think this is going to be an insanely awesome matchup to watch. I think it's going to be a very close game. I think USC really does compete and hangs with Gonzaga, and we haven't really seen that yet in this tournament. So I'm excited to see kind of how Gonzaga handles being in a closer game that they haven't really had to deal with in a while, other than being down to BYU at the half in the WCC championship game. I'm gonna book it. One of these two Pac-12 schools wins tonight. one of them does. I'm not going to pick which one because it's March Madness, and if I pick one, like put a significant chunk of money on the other one because I always have a reverse jigs. But yeah, either Gonzaga or Michigan will fall to one of these Pac-12 schools, and I'm going to book that one, and we'll see what happens. But I feel confident about that for some reason. Crazy things happen in this time of year.
I mean, I agree. I think both are playing really well. It's just the stylistic matchups are hard, and I feel like stylistically USC matches up better with Gonzaga than UCLA does with Michigan. But I just think Gonzaga is like a tier ahead of Michigan, so it's like hard to pick. But I'm rooting for chaos. You know what? I'll be rooting for it. It's kind of hard for me to root for USC. I'm going to be honest. I've been bred not to like USC, but go Pac-12. I can get behind that. So, but also go Baylor. I just want to be right since I've said that all year. So go Baylor.
Baylor has looked impressive, and so I think that pretty much covers the Elite Eight / Sweet 16 conversation that we wanted to have in terms of the games that have happened. Do you want to just kind of shoot some thoughts about this Final Four matchup that we already have penciled in, and then give me your predictions for what you'll potentially see over here with the two last blank slots that need to be filled?
Sure. Yeah. A couple things that stand out to me immediately when I see Baylor and Houston playing. I think you see some really good defense. And right now, I think Houston's defense is playing better than Baylor's defense, but Baylor's offense is playing more efficiently than Houston's offense. And so what matters then is possessions. And that's what Houston relies upon. They rely on getting a ton of rebounds. They've played two zone teams in a row. As I mentioned, Syracuse and Oregon State played heavily. Well, Syracuse played entirely zone and Oregon State played heavily zone again in their matchups, and Houston dominated the glass. So that is the biggest key in my opinion is the matchup on the boards. Can Baylor keep Houston off the glass? And then if I'm going to give a matchup, and that's obviously a key for Houston as well, continue to pound the glass. And then for Houston, other than rebounding, it's 3-point shooting. If they can hit some threes to complement the extra possessions that they get by pounding the glass tenaciously, that'll be huge because you get extra possessions, you get extra threes up. But they haven't been able to hit them. They've just been able to rebound at such an elite rate with such a good defense that they've been able to win. But I think Baylor's a different beast. I think the zone is easier to rebound against than a man-to-man. So you got to hit some more threes than they have been. And then as for Baylor, I think that hitting threes is also paramount. I think a matchup between Dejan Jarreau and Davion Mitchell is going to be extremely interesting because Davion Mitchell's been able to get wherever he wants. He gets layups, and then you have to pick your poison. You either help, and then you give up a three in the corner to Maceo Teague, Adam Flagler, Jared Butler, or Matthew Meyer. They pick your poison, or you stay at home on the shooter and you let Davion Mitchell get to the rim. So I think that matchup is paramount. And I think just 3-point shooting, I think Baylor is a better shooting team. In fact, I know that because they're the best 3-point shooting team in the country, but it's a one-game matchup. If Baylor shoots well, they've got a really good chance. And then the rebounding is huge. So shooting and rebounding, huge keys to me. And also turnovers. I think Houston's a really opportunistic defense. They get a lot of steals. Baylor's been really good at taking care of the ball. They're like plus 40 through 4 games now, I think, in terms of something around there. They've been ridiculously good at keeping care of the ball and forcing turnovers. So turnovers, shooting, rebounds. So those are my keys. I went in depth there. Am I missing anything, or do you want to add any matchups that you see? Because I can't wait. This is a beautiful matchup for me.
Yeah, no, I'm just excited to kind of see how it all plays out. I mean, I think you have a team in Houston who's been doubted all tournament long, and by me included. I'll be the first to say that I didn't see Houston go into the Final Four out of the region. So congratulations, first and foremost, are in order to Houston and making it there. I think a lot of people, they're feeling that too, of a lot of people doubting them. And I know a lot of people didn't pick them to make it to the Final Four. So I'm excited to see them play with that little chip on their shoulder and see how they stack up with, in my opinion, one of the two best teams in the country and how it's been all season long. I'm excited to see Baylor and the mantra that they kind of come out with in this game. If they play with that chip of, we're the best team in the country, I don't know if Houston has enough to compete just personally. But with that being said, Crazy things happen. It is March, and it's going to be one heck of a Final Four matchup. I'm really excited, and yeah, just I think the only other thing that I really asked was give me some of your thoughts on who's going to be in those other two blank slots after tonight.
I don't want to take the two favorites, but I think I have to. I think I mentioned that I thought Michigan really had a good stylistic advantage. I think that Jaime Jaquez has been awesome, but I think Franz Wagner's a better player. And I think that they've played so many good opponents with shooters like that Juzang won't give them the same type of trouble he's given to some other teams. And I think Hunter Dickinson in the post is a big advantage because I don't think UCLA is that great defensively. They're a better offensive team, and I think that favors Michigan. I think Michigan would rather play a bad defensive team than a really good offensive team. I think that are the same. That's the same thing. But I think this matchup is conducive for Michigan. And then as for Gonzaga, it's just hard to pick against them. I really do think this could be a really close game. I feel like Michigan will be. I'm more confident Michigan wins by would cover the spread. I don't know what the spread is, but I'm more confident in their ability to cover the spread than I am in Gonzaga's, because Gonzaga's spread is elevated by the fact that they're number one in the country. They're undefeated. And I think that doesn't help a team. I think they can play for the goal, but I feel like that provides more pressure than it does pressure relief. And I think USC, if they hit shots, have a really good chance because they have size. They should win the rebounding war. They can make Drew Timme less of a factor. And then that really puts pressure on Corey Kispert and Jalen Suggs. And say what you will about Jalen Suggs, but being a freshman guard is very different. It's very hard. You don't see freshman guards dominate the tournament. You almost never do. So you see veteran guards. So I think that might actually help USC because they've got some grad transfers in their backcourt. And I'm still picking Gonzaga, but in seeing Gonzaga and Michigan, that'll be really, really fun matchup. And I just think that no Isaiah Livers, if that were to happen, would really hurt Michigan because they need all the scoring punch they can have. So I will be taking Gonzaga, and I'm going to stay with it. I think Baylor's the team to beat.
I love it. Yeah, I'm not going to really offer up my 2 cents on who's going to play in the Final Four on this half because I did book that one of the Pac-12 schools would be there, and if I say one of them, the other one will happen, and I don't want to do that to people. So pulling for the Pac-12, pulling for great games. Honestly, I think that's what I'm most looking forward to. I think both UCLA and USC belong in the situations that they've been put in to play 2 of the 1 seeds. They've been very impressive, and the performance in overtime against Alabama for UCLA really spoke to me in terms of their desire and their will to really win in some of these games. And a lot of that plays into this. And there's like, I've said this all tournament long, there's some stats that really can't be measured when it comes to some of these games. And I'm not saying that they matter more than the stats that can be measured, but there's intangibles that you need to have to win some of these games. And I believe all 4 teams that you'll see on the court tonight have those intangibles. And I just think it's going to be a really interesting evening to kind of watch what unfolds. And when you know that you're playing for an opportunity to be one of the last 4 teams left in this whole tournament out of 68 that play is just an amazing feat regardless. And so whoever gets there is going to be very deserving. And I'm really looking forward to watching what happens. So any other final thoughts before we sign off? Because I think we've covered pretty much everything that we set out to.
I've got a random fun fact for today.
Love it.
I think there's going to be a great game, perhaps an all-time type of game today, and I'm just hoping so, and I'll tell you why. It's because 2 years ago on this exact date, Virginia beat Purdue in what I consider to be one of the greatest games that I've seen in an Elite Eight. So I'm hoping that March 30th will carry over in a positive little curse in a good way this time, because I want a great game, and I think 2 years ago we saw some awesome games. So here's to hoping that happens, and I can't wait for the Final Four, and we'll be back with you for more coverage of that, of course, and more coverage throughout the week of March Madness, and hope you guys are enjoying it as much as we are.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll be back with you later on this week to preview the Final Four matchups that will take place on Saturday, if my scheduling here is correct. So it'll be an amazing day Saturday. We'll have all the goods for you out and preview both games heavily before they happen. So thanks all for tuning in. Really do appreciate it. Hopefully you all have a great rest of your Tuesday. Enjoy the games tonight. Take in some great basketball and Leaf will be with you on Thursday for his takeover, and we'll probably put out our Final Four preview on Friday, and then yeah, we'll take it from there and see who's playing. And we're getting steps closer towards a national champion, which is awesome to hear, and we're really looking forward to it. So take care, everyone. Have a great rest of your day, and we will catch you next time.
Have a good one.